Hi, I am Sabrina, founder and president of Women of Hearts. Who am I and why is this so important to me? I am the face of domestic abuse. I have struggled all my life with some sort of abuse from someone. I've been a punching bag for many. As a child, I was abused by my stepfather. I was so embarrassed and ashamed, I kept it from everyone. I was a child who not only dealt with abuse in the home, I was also abused by bullies. There were so many times I wanted to take my own life. I couldn't understand why everyone hated me so much. I couldn't understand why I lived in a house where I was the only one who got beat. He never laid his hands on his own kids. Why was I that bad? Tried to commit suicide several times, hated my life and hated feeling unwanted, alone, helpless, etc. I looked for love in anyone who'd show it. I was very promiscuous because sex to me was love. I was pregnant at 18 and had a miscarriage. Dealt with abuse in my first long-term relationship. Tried to commit suicide due to the abuse. Couldn't understand why he cheated so many times, no matter how much I loved him. No matter how much I gave myself to him. Got out of that relationship and fell right into the next one. This man was a real man. He taught me things I never knew. He surpassed my knowledge of sex and actually made love to me. He also listened very well to all the stories of my life, soaking everything in like a sponge. He was the perfect gentleman at first. I was in love. After time passed, he slowly began keeping me from family and friends. He was jealous and had to know where I was at all times. He'd just say he loved me so much he wanted me all to himself. That was the type of love I thought I needed and wanted because no one else ever cared. He introduced me to drugs and we'd drink and get high on a regular. I'd have to be careful when he'd get angry because I knew it would lead to him hitting me. It honestly started out beautiful, then eventually went to verbal and mental abuse, then to complete physical and sexual abuse. I once again was too embarrassed to tell anyone. I was scared of this man. We ended up getting pregnant and I had a beautiful baby boy. I already had a child from my last relationship, and here I was 23 with 2 kids. I left this man so many times, and every time I left, he'd find me, professing his undying love. Nobody was ever going to love me like he did. Nobody understood me like he did. At least that's what he had me believing. As time passed, I eventually ended up marrying this man. His abuse was completely focused on me until I started fighting back. Once he felt like he was losing control, he began to focus on my oldest son. It took me a little time, but eventually I sent my oldest to live with his father, and I got myself out of the relationship as quickly as I could. I was the abused stepchild, and I wasn't going to let my son take my place. It was time to break the chain. Once I got out on my own, I got stronger. I stayed focused on raising my sons the best way I knew how. Eventually, my ex went to prison for 7 years for gun charges, so he was finally out of my hair for good. I began working in Greensboro and met another man. This man was different. He was strong and powerful. He stood up to my ex before he went to prison, and I was no longer scared of him. He promised me the moon and the stars, and I believed every word that came out of his mouth. Long story short, after 3 years, we got married. He was different in so many ways, but he was controlling. He gave me anything I wanted and showered me with love. He took great care of my sons and treated them as his own. He had nothing when we started out, and my MO seemed to be to lift these men up and help them be better than they were before me. In the whole 15 years he cheated, he put his hands on me. He called me out of my name. He constantly accused me of cheating, but I stayed because he was the sole provider and because I loved him. I thought we had so much together and my kids wanted for nothing. That's what kept me there. Crazy it sounds, but it's the truth. My journals were filled with the pain he caused me, but I continued forward. Finally, he left me for another woman. I didn't understand it at first. It honestly broke me. I stood by this man through all his craziness and took care of him when he couldn't even take care of himself. And he could just leave me like I was nothing. He cut me and my boys off like we never existed. It took a lot of praying, drinking, smoking, praying, and love from my boys to pull me out of that darkness. How could this man do this to me? I felt like that child who was alone again. I felt like that little girl who wanted to take her life because she wasn't loved. So this is why I started this org. This is why I needed this to take off. I needed women to know they are not alone. Someone else out there has a story that sounds like theirs. I made it out, and so can you. I've been through what I feel sometimes is more than my share of bad times. Let's get through this together. Funny, it was my ex who brought me the necklaces home for me to figure out what to do with them. This was my start to something great. Join me on my journey. Join me on our journey. Let's end domestic abuse. Let's help our teen girls because yes, they are being abused as well. Let's encourage our women to stand up. Please join me.